Bom dia para você que é de bom dia, boa noite para você que é da boa noite, boa tarde. Você está vindo agora no YouTube para assistir mais um podcast Bate-Papo Mayhem. E hoje a gente vai estar com a linda Falorio, direto da Itália ou dos Estados Unidos, vai falar um pouquinho sobre o processo do Shadow Tarot, que está traduzido para o português. Já é esgotado, mas a gente vai tentar convencer ela a traduzir de novo. Então, você precisa, para entender, ligar aqui embaixo subtitles and then translate to Portuguese. E aí ele vai te passar as legendas na língua em portuguesa. So now I will speak in English. Thank you so much, Linda, for being here with us in the show today. I am a bit nervous because you are like a legend to us. We used to collect your tarot in the 90s to 2000s, and we, in the beginning of internet, and we printed it out and glued it to the back of the tarot cards just to have your tarot. It was great that Luciano convinced you and talked to you into printing a Brazilian version of your tarot. So I'm a bit nervous. They said you have to talk to your idols sometimes, and I'm very happy to have you here. So how are you?
Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you, very kind. So yeah, it was exciting to have the tarot printed and translated in Brazil into Portuguese. So, but it's been a long journey. I think some of your questions sort of, where did how did it all start? Well, you mentioned someone who was born next to the Vatican and ended up leading the OTO. Well, I wasn't born next to the Vatican, but my family is Italian on both sides, immigrated to the United States. And so magic was always in my family. Both of my grandmothers were village healers, and so I learned some rituals from them as a very young child. I was called Strega when I was just a little baby. And so, you know, that background of being raised a Catholic, of course, the ritual and the religion, it sort of sets you up for that sort of thing. And then I went all through Catholic school, and but I've made my own path. I was a very sick little child, so I spent a lot of time alone painting and drawing. So that's where that came into everything. And so I'm not sure where to go from there. Ask me some questions.
Well, the first question is, you began with your family to study that, and then you went into art, and you have an art degree. And when did you become studying craft talent and magic more seriously?
Well, it's hard to say. As I said, I grew up with it. I grew up learning rituals from the old country, from Italy. When I was in high school, I was in a Catholic high school, but they had a library with a lot of books on Taoism and other religions and magical traditions. And then when I was in college, other books started becoming published. Carlos Castaneda, Taoism, Taoist Magic, Tantra, Timothy Leary's Book of the Dead. There were a lot of things coming out that I just ate up. And the psychology came in because realizing getting out of college, I was going to have to make a living somehow. And so I thought, well, and I would study that. But added to that is, I'm one of those people that people just open up to, and they tell tell me everything about them. So I decided I should learn what that was about. So there we are to that point. And I studied, when I went to graduate school, I got more into the mantic arts. I studied palmistry so that I walked up and down the beach at Miami Beach and I would pick people out and say, let me read your palm. And they would, so I was practicing.
Linda got very few refusals in her yellow bikini on Biscayne Bay. They would usually let a beautiful girl in a yellow bikini read their poems.
That did make it, that made it easy. So, so it just sort of, you know, it naturally developed. I'm not sure, you know, where you want, you know, ask me some questions. Where are we going from here? So, you know, it's all of me. I can't explain it. When I, in high school, I gave a speech at commencement, and it was the line from Shakespeare. So now I can't remember. Be true to yourself, and it will follow as the night, the day. Thou canst not be false to any man. And that's really the essence of Thelema, if you think about it. It really is, you know, being true to that essence of who you find yourself to be. But it's not easy to figure out who that is, of course. That's the trick of the whole thing, is, you know, taking away the layers of what your family thinks you should do, what your friends think you should do, what your culture thinks you should do, and figuring out really who you are beyond all of that stuff. So that's always the quest. So it started early with me and has continued.
One thing I think that's important to keep in mind is that Linda had been exposed to and had studied in very great depth, in some cases, many different books and systems, and she wasn't an uninitiated or unliterate kind of person when we discovered Crowley's material and when we discovered Thelema. And that, so it's hard to say, well, because that fit into a pattern that already was well established in terms of the whole history and who Linda was. And there's so many different threads that come into it that it gets complex.
I'm a complicated person.
Right. I just wanted to point out that you were relatively sophisticated in your studies of a variety of different things. You were a doctoral student in clinical psychology. Mm-hmm. You'd already studied Franz Barden and that system. You've been the SRF, Paramahansa Yogananda, and that system. So that she'd already looked at many different kinds of things, and many of us were looking at that time to make sense out of our reality. And I think that when we discovered Aleister Crowley's writings, he was very confirmatory of what we already thought about things. We read him and said, oh, here's someone who understands things sort of the way that we do. So it wasn't a fresh discovery. It was almost like a confirmation of our realities.
That's actually what Crowley says, is that initiation is a confirmation of what you already know and who you already are. It doesn't confer anything upon you. It confirms what you've already achieved and learned. So that's just what Fred was explaining. That so around that time we did, you know, discover Crowley. a lot of things in the 70s came back into print, so that was exciting. I have to say we did reach out to the OTO and never got an answer back. So we wrote to Grady. That was probably a good thing, actually. So yeah, so we were we lived everywhere. Meanwhile, we found ourselves in Coconut Grove, Miami, and I went to the laundromat and I saw this guy sitting there reading the Blue Equinox, of all things, in the laundromat. So I said, hey, that's the Blue Equinox. So we became friends with Jeff Evans, who ended up being American head of the Typhonian OTO. But I must say, we never joined, any OTO or any of these things. So we've sort of just done our own thing.
How hard it was to get books and knowledge and things like that to study back in the days?
Can you repeat, please? Ask your question again, please. I didn't catch it.
And how hard it was here in Brazil back in the 70s, 80s. It was nearly impossible to find any books on the occult. And we have to rely on librarians that sometimes they travel to Europe and bring the book back. How was it in the United States? If you want to study and you're not in the OTO, how did you manage to do that?
Many things were slowly coming into print. It had been very difficult, but it was becoming more easier to find things. So, but Fred and I, we traveled all over the United States. We in Arizona, we found a bunch of Crowley books and Lieber Ockett and other writers. We ended up back in Pittsburgh at one point and spent our last $200 on the collected Equinox. So, but we had faith that
Weiser's edition.
Yeah, Weiser's edition. We had faith.
Basically spending a lot of time in bookstores and just looking. At different times, people will give up their collections, or they fall somehow into our hands. So we assembled. But you couldn't order books from Amazon and you couldn't, that weren't available like they are now. So it was difficult.
Oh, it was. And, there's so much out now. It's astonishing. So many people are writing and publishing. And honestly, I do not keep up with things anymore. I'm just on my own little thing. But, so it's exciting how much there is out there.
All right. What's your point of view work of Steffi Grant and Kenneth? Because we'll talk about your most famous tarot, at least here in Brazil. That's the Shadow Tarot. It was based on the Clifford. And why the Clifford and not the Kabbalah and the Sephiroth? That was the most common representation.
It is based on the Kabbalah, actually. The Clifford is the reverse of the tree. So what happened is I wrote a little book called Liber CXV, the English Kabbalah, and it goes through values for the English letters as Liber Owls request you to do. And so then I thought, well, I'll write to Kenneth Grant and see what he has to say about it. This was like 1981, maybe. So over the years, I received 100 letters from him. So I guess I sent 100 letters back. So we had quite a correspondence. At some point, probably in 82, he said, I'm starting this thing called the Nightside Project. And what we're going to do is use Crowley's Liber 231 and do a tarot. And there were, half a dozen of us doing artwork for the various, we were just doing the Trumps at that point.
He said there were artists all over the world, he implied, but we didn't know really who all they were.
So at any rate, we started the project and became very involved and excited about it. It's based on Night Side of Eden and things that Kenneth wrote about, Crowley's Liber 231, which is pretty sketchy. And so Fred and I, as we explain in the book, embarked on 55 months, we said, of magical workings, just doing the Trumps. Unfortunately, the other people in the group didn't really get very far. And so they did really amazing cards, but they didn't produce very many of them. And so Fred and I just said, well, we're going to put that out there. We're going to just put the cards out there. And it was actually a cottage industry. Print them, cut them up, pack them up, put a magical charge on them, and mail them out.
We didn't promote them. When we started, we did one card and then another card, and we didn't really start out with the intention
we didn't know we would do them
all.
No.
But we went in for a diamond for $1, English joke. We found that we needed to buy a new house because we had to have access to both the space above us and below us. So in order to effectively carry out the magic required, we bought a new house.
Well, it wasn't new to us. It was a 100-year-old house.
Old house.
We bought a new old house.
Yeah,
a wreck. It was a wreck, but oh well.
It served our purpose in did the requisite magic and the opera. It did take for 55 months.
Yeah, it was also a house typically that had
ended up doing all of them, and we found that at some point we found that we were the only ones really working on it. And this was again with Linda and Kenneth, who were corresponding pretty regularly through this period. And,
so we also found that this house happened to have a Stargate in it, which was a little bit weird.
Wow.
Which allowed for time travel and other kinds of things. So
great. And this first print was practically some magical items, really magical tools, manufactured one by one. This is great to know that. You have degrees in psychology and art. How does this unique way to mix these three great areas of knowledge, art, psychology, and magic? So there's a question that we ask to all guests, that is, what is magic to you? Based on your background and everything that you experience in life, what is magic?
Accessing and using forces that aren't commonly known. It can take many forms. It's body energy. It's calling on entities that maybe aren't recognized by others. In psychology, I got very involved with body magic, energy, the orgone, Wilhelm Reich, and so that, the whole magic is using energy of your body to connect with the energy fields in the earth, beyond the earth, other entities. So it can be exciting, it can be terrifying, it can be useful, it's inspiring. You can use magic to protect yourself in difficult situations. I've certainly done that. I used to do psychic readings, and I had the house very strongly protected. And there were some people who were not able to enter our house because of the magical protections. They couldn't bring their demons in with them, let us say. So that was a good thing.
Nice. And how was the process of making this tarot? And did you start by some atu specifically, and then you follow it like 1, 2, 3, 4, or did you paint it in different ways? Did you choose an arcana first? How was the whole process? Did you make the major arcana first, or the middle arcana? And how was it constructed?
We started with Cherisith because I'm a Cancerian, and that's the card for that sign. But it was like a box of chocolates, you know. We picked this one, we picked that one. And then we would do magical workings, all based on Tantra, but we'd do other things like for Hermetismo. No. One of them we have caves here, we went into the caves, contacted the cave creatures. So, you know, we did different we did different kinds of things depending, but we just would pick one, and then we would I would take these particular ones are watercolor, acrylic, gouache, all water media. And so I'd put a piece of paper on the table where we're doing our workings, and then everything. Well, the master of the temple working is you take everything that happens to you as a message from the gods. So everything that happened once we would decide to work a particular card, we took as meaningful to that card. So all sorts of things would happen, and then they would one by one get incorporated into the design of the card until we felt that card was complete. And sometimes we would leave it up because we were having so much fun with it, and we would, you know, keep working it for a while, even after the actual image was completed. So yeah, it was basically, you know, whatever card spoke to us at that moment and the way we would approach our working with it. I must say that besides Tantra, we mostly did astral workings. As I said, some physical workings, like going into a cave and contacting the cave creatures. You have something to say, Fred? Fred wants to add.
Well, I could say a couple of things. One thing is we found that we didn't choose a path through the cards. We didn't say we'll do this or do them in this order. When one card was completed, another card would begin to manifest. I mean, it wasn't a questioning for some reason about what was going to happen next.
Right, they came forth of their own accord.
They just came to us as they came. The other thing is that and sometimes they would just, like, you know, you'd be done with one and then you'd be hit with an enormous hint that, oh my goodness, I have to do this card next. And that could take a lot of different forms. But some cards came very quickly and easily, and other cards took a long time and a lot of work, or seemed to take longer. And of course, we had different perspectives. It was interesting to hear Linda's perspective of how things develop. I was doing something different during those operations in terms of, I'll use the word throwing the results and the energetic results of tantric exercises onto the canvas, onto the sigil. I also used the hints that Kenneth Grant provides in terms of pitches vibrations, pitches that you can hum or
right.
In some way generate. Could be done electronically, could be done however you want to look at that. But there are certain pitches that seem to elicit responses, physical responses. And so I use the hints that Kenneth.
Sometimes clickings or other
clicking
sounds.
noises sometimes for some cards, and other kinds of things like that. But he does provide those clues as to how to access that.
Right.
And then, and we've talked and written a lot about this, that, when we then would feel like we were, you're not really in the tunnel. You have experiences, but it's not like you're either in the tunnel or you're not in the tunnel. You can't stand outside and look in. You're there.
And in the same time that you were painting the tarot, you experienced that energy. I have been hearing that a lot from the tarot painters, that all the work interacts with the worker. It's a two-way. It's really nice. I have a question here from Bruno. He says, what are your views on the Qliphoth specifically? I have interviewed Thomas Carlson and some other authors about their views on what is a Qliphoth, what's the difference between the Qliphothic work and the Kabbalistic work. So I'd like to ask you, what is your vision on this subject?
I don't see them as separate. Just, the idea is that the Qliphotic work are cast off shells, so to speak, but they're energies that we can reclaim. So they're part of the Kabbalah. They're, kind of talks about it as the backside of the tree. So to get there, you dive through Death, which is the false Sephirah, above the abyss. So it's a little bit dangerous. You really should have what's called the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel before you do that. You must have a strong ego. If you don't, do not try this at all. So, a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't be egotistic. It's not egotistic, it's having a strong sense of self and communication with your Holy Guardian Angel. And I talk a lot about that. I see that as the Orisha making that connection for us. So they're very important to me, the African gods and goddesses. I have a strong connection there, past life connection. So, so the Qliphoth to me is, I'm not that intellectual about it. I'm more experiential. And so you're just in it, you're part of it. You see what's there. I don't know. I'm not making any sense because there's not sense to be made there.
We use that word Qliphoth or Qliphotic, but haven't had debates with rabbis about. You understand what I'm saying? I know that that word comes from rabbinicals. Really to study or learn about Qliphotic or talk about the Qliphotic, you really should be a rabbi and to study Kabbalah. So, given that recognition, it's not an approach like a rabbinical student would have to the shells or to that word Qliphoth. And my Hebrew is very weak, so I can't even pronounce it and give it a correct pronunciation. It's just, again, working with Liber 231 and at the suggestion of Kenneth Grant, more so than in terms of the background, a formal background. And then everything was just what happened. And it was a recording for us. It was just a recording of what happened. And Linda produced the paintings. That was our object all along. We wanted to produce the images. Right.
So a lot of people will have a much more formal idea and way to look at the Qliphoth, but I just really don't. It's just a place to experience, jump into the tunnel, see what's there, and then you'll know. But as I said, it's the back of the tree, so dive through death if you dare, and go from there.
I asked you that because here in Brazil for years, the shadow tarot was, people were afraid of it. And they said, oh, it is an evil tarot. And because we are used to the idea that from the Golden Dawn, that the tarot is from the Sephiroth and the angels and everything. And it was the first tarot based on the Qliphoth, and it had some heavy drawings, and people were afraid to even look at it. And it became sort of a legend here. I don't know, was it the same everywhere in the world, or is just Brazil?
Oh, we were invited to do a presentation at a festival in New York. I think it was the Starwood Festival that they have up here every year. This was at the beginning. And so we were doing a presentation, and across the way, they were doing an anti-rite against us because it was so evil and they were so afraid of us. So it was kind of made us happy that someone was doing an anti-rite, that we had that much power that they thought anyway. So yes, it's always been that way.
We had a slide projector, and we were projecting the images up onto a slide and playing the music that we were listening to.
Industrial music at the time, I think.
Music by a band called Throbbing Gristle. Oh no, it was probably Hope, the Hope organization.
Yeah, Hope organization.
Anyway.
So it was funny. We laughed about it, but so yes, it's people have thought we're evil, but that's all right. We don't mind.
Yeah, when I said I was going to interview you, a lot of people come say, wow, there must be Satanists, very evil. How are you going to do that? I say, whoa, I have seen their work in the Facebook. This is great, lovely work. And they're really nice people. But here in Brazil, we are experiencing some of Satanic Panic here. Now we have a president that is a neo-Pentecostal, an evangelical one. So even if you are a Reiki practitioner, you're a Satanist. So there's practically no difference. Was there any Satanic Panic in United States involved with your work?
Not involved with our work, but there has been Satanic Panic. Not recently that I'm aware of, but in the 90s, there was a big Satanic Panic. They were claiming that Satanists were taking babies and killing them and burying them. And Fred even talked to an FBI guy who was supposed to do it.
There was a man named Kenneth Lanning, for people that want to look at this stuff. Lanning, Lanning, he's a supervising special agent for the FBI who had that on his plate and traveled all over the world, really, the United States mainly, to try and find these alleged groups of Satanists who were using children in satanic rites and so on. He couldn't.
No.
He said he had the resources of the entire government at his disposal, but could find no evidence whatsoever anywhere of any organized satanic. Now, there were, quote, Satanists, unquote, who were using the occult, just like using candy to lure children.
Wow.
So if you say you've got powers, certain people, but it's just the same old scam that anybody would, So what Lanning found was, he went public about it, went all over the country to law enforcement agencies. That's how I saw him, to try and tell people that this isn't going on because he was seeing just regular, run-of-the-mill pedophiles that were abusing children getting off and walking free because he couldn't convince the jury or the judges that they weren't fire-breathing Satanists. And these people had nothing to do. I mean, it was just, they were just using that. So that was, that was where law enforcement.
Yeah. So we've got other problems here now, but not to, the Satanism. I mean, they're LaVey and of course Dr. Carlson and others who are Luciferians and Satanists in the true sense and not in the Satanic Panic kind of idea. We're not talking about that at all. And of course, Satanists have a similar idea to Thelemites in that, individualism is the important thing.
The Satanists that I know believe that they are responsible for the consequences of their actions.
Right.
They take responsibility. That's enough said about them.
Yeah. So I saw someone ask, for someone who's never had contact with the cliff off, is it safe? A question popped up.
Yes, this is a question from Ramon, Stephanie. Is it safe for people who never had any contact with Clifford to use your tarot and evoke or use it as a portal? And then we will talk a little more about that. How do you intend people to use your tarot as a divination, as an oracle, as a portal? And if you can say something about this thing too.
However they want. But divination is probably the safest way to do it. There are a lot of people really meditating and using the cards as a portal. As divination, you would probably use all 78 cards. As a portal, people tend to mostly use the trump cards. There are a lot of people now working with the demonic elements as found in the Lesser Key of Solomon. There are a lot of people doing that. I don't think that's real safe. I think my opinion is, unless you're just using divination, if you really want to explore things, you must make the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. You just must do that. And then, yes, you're safe because you're unified. You're not going to be led astray or ripped asunder or
torn asunder.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, so there's
it's not beginner's magic.
Not at all.
It's not beginner stuff. It's pretty advanced stuff. So, my estimation would be, with Linda, I mean, you have to do the work. You can't jump over things and then that. For instance, astrology. I'll just use that as an example where I've seen people do this. Because of the technology that came about when they wrote all these astrology programs. Linda, when she learned astrology, you had to build charts and do the mathematics, and then suddenly you could get internet. You could now you can get programs for $30 that'll give you every harmonic.
Yeah, I used to do all that calculation by hand.
Yeah, but it'll give you such complicated information now astrologically that nobody knows what to do with that or what it means. But because I have somebody back when we were talking about astrology with people, and they don't know what Jupiter means compared to Mars, but they want to talk about the seventh harmonic that just ticked off in their chart from the lunar passage or something. It's like, well, you've got to start with the basic stuff. For me, at least, you've got to start and do the work and do the basic. When we used to years and years ago take students. We would start with things like the candle meditation.
Right. So
can you do? I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So the best thing that can happen if you're really a beginner is nothing. You know what I mean? Like if you want to dive into if you really are a neophyte and the first thing you want to do is dive into the tunnels, probably the best thing that can happen is nothing. Because I mean, as I said, I used to do psychic readings, and I had people come to me who got into terrible trouble using a Ouija board. And in fact, that's of course how the exorcist gets started. She contacts Pazuzu through the Ouija board. But I mean, you don't know who you're calling on in the Ouija board. You know, you don't know who's going to come. So even the most innocuous kind of thing can be dangerous if you have a little bit of skill. I mean, you're better off if you have no skill, you know, with the Ouija board, and it's just a parlor game. But people have a little skill, then they call up. We don't know who they're calling. They don't know who they're calling, and the spirits can be very sticky, so to speak, in terms of, well, you've seen the movie The Exorcist, you know. I mean, it can be really bad.
Yeah, I asked you that because here in Brazil, when it became famous, forbidden tarot and something like that, we have a lot of the youngers practitioners that they just started in the internet, in Facebook groups, and they were starting to treat demons as Pokemons and start evoking and everything that the worst things happen to this. So they have gotta get them all, and they start dealing with the Clifford. And the first time they didn't have any study, and they began working with the Clifford. So they'd say, "Oh, my life is ruined and everything," and then they blame it on the Clifford. They said, "Oh, it's evil." But all the experienced people that get in contact with your tarot has just great things to say. I am one of them. I think you helped me a lot. I was with the Adeptus Minor working, and it helped me understand a lot about how the Tree of Life really worked, the shadow part of the tree. So for me, it was a great knowledge. I have to thank you a lot for that. For me, that's a pleasure to talk to you today. Let me see if I have more the other questions. And for these young people, the people that are starting now, what advice would you give them? Besides not starting with the cliff.
Starting magic? Well, you know, everyone's path is different. So, as you know, whatever draws them, but I'm a fan of, you know, I keep saying the knowledge and conversation of the HGA. You know, you have to get in touch with your higher angel. And in my opinion, it's like another entity. It's, you know, personal to you, but it's a powerful entity that will keep you safe through many things in life and not just setting the cliff off. So that would be my first goal. So if you look at the Tree of Life, you've got Malkuth, of course, everyone's there. Then you've got Yesod. Well, that's the world of the emotions, and humans are there a lot. But then you've got the Veil of Haraketh to go up to Tiferet, to the inner sun, the knowledge and conversation. And Tiferet is the Christ consciousness, the ego center. So, you know, go up the tree, start in Malkuth, do Yesod, do Netzach, go up, do, you know, so then you'll eventually get to the abyss, and maybe you want to cross it, maybe you don't, but that's okay. But I would say if you want a structure, the tree of life is the structure. It's not till you cross the abyss, get to death, that you can dive through. If you get to Kater, maybe you want to jump back down. So I would suggest, and whatever tools along the way through the various sephira that appeal to you. But again, to me, that the knowledge and conversation, that's where you want to be. It does worry me a little bit when people, particularly they're working with the small cards that I developed in this tarot at a later time, and using the Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon. And I worry about that because, these demons are real, and, you don't want them traipsing around your house necessarily. So, but I find kids just, finding one they like and calling them up and thinking it's all great and dandy. Well, I wouldn't advise it. So I would advise going up the tree, and then if you want to go in, do the whole deck for divination is great. But if you want to do the meditation in the tunnels, do the trumps, go in and see what happens.
And I just wanted to say this in terms of what Linda was saying, that I could see some people getting into trouble by not closing down threads. I'll put it that way. Think about it from an IT and information technology point of view. Some people write programs and they leave all kinds of processes open and don't close them down, and pretty soon the application doesn't work very well because it's got all these processes going and it's all just confusion, right? You need to close the thread once you open it. So it's the same thing. If you're working with something, then finish that before you take on something else. Pretty soon, otherwise you end up with a big confusion and you don't know what to attribute to what. Because
I believe this comparison with the computer is one of the best I have ever. This comparison that you make with the computer program was one of the best advices I ever had in this show. It's great because electronic is like the astral plane in the end, isn't it? And we are approaching the end of the show. So how can we find you? But before I ask you this question, everyone is asking me to ask you if it would be possible to have a new edition of your tarot in Brazil, because here Luciano only had 93 tarot and they sold like water in the desert, and there were a lot of people who want to have it. And how was the process to publish it in Brazil?
We'll have to talk with Luciano and see, because he was kind enough to have it translated. So, that is his intellectual property, so to speak. So to have it in Portuguese in Brazil, we'll have to work that out. If there's a way to publish more, it was his choice about how many how many he wanted to publish. So he can just contact me and we'll see if we can make more available. But I don't have a problem with that. It was, it's, I think because publishing is so expensive, he was limited in that. And I believe he did a GoFundMe to help fund the edition. So he and I can have that conversation, and if you want to approach him and see how you can help him or encourage him, that would be great too.
Oh, yes, I will be following him. We have produced our tarot here. This one is my tarot. And we have a contact with graphics. Here in Brazil, it's very difficult to print out tarot decks. I believe that's why I had so much difficulties. But we got some things and some graphic works and publisher houses that we make this happen. And of course, I will be on to him now. And now that I have your blessing, I will talk to him. We will have more of your tarot here in Brazil. So I think so great to talk to you today. And the last question is, how can we find you on the internet?
I have one thing I want to say before I tell you how to find me. I want to stress how important the use of tantric techniques and body magic have been through my whole magical career. So if anyone wants to explore things I have done, that's really, really where it's at. The body holds everything. So the tantric arts are very important. And I'm on Facebook, of course, or you can go to shadowtarot.net or shadowtarot.com or anandazone.nu. And how else would you want to? And send me emails or send me, friend me, follow me, send me a message. Any way you want.
That's great. All this information is here on the description of this video. Well, I have here, V is asking me, I usually ask this question only to the religious leaders and things that, and people who work with the religious, but they said you have to ask them. So this is the question is, what do you believe, based on your personal studies and your personal view, happens to us after time?
I think we go on. I've had many past life memories come to me. Sometimes I would rather that didn't happen, but I believe we go on, our energy goes on. In my family, we have a tradition that we pray to our beloved dead to help us in our difficulties. They're our first line of request. So I think our energies are still there. They're there to help others. We may come back and reincarnate. So I think there's another world that we walk through. And don't you feel it sometimes? Sometimes I feel like I'm walking through spirits and veils and just walking in my normal life. So there's so much around us. So yeah. So, and our heaven and our hell are all within us. So, keep our thoughts at a high vibration and it's all good.
Well, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Linda, to have you here in the show. I'm thrilled, still nervous, but it has been really, really great. Thrilled. I hope when the pandemic ends, we can bring you here to Brazil, talk to us, and I will talk to Luciano. Now I have this conversation. I will show him and say what if, and people want your tarot. You are very loved here. And when you come to Brazil, I will bring you to the Umbanda centers and Candomblé and Kimbanda so you can see that in person. And thank you so much for me.
Thank you.
All right. So, e você que estava acompanhando a gente até agora, então não esquece de dar like, segue o canal e a gente se vê aí no próximo Bate-Papo Mayhem.